Hello friends, this is DarkScream and welcome back to the last 10.0.7 PTR with the Ret Paladin revamp. The dawn of the final day. We have to give our final verdict. So this week we'll be doing things a little differently just because there are actually some early sims out and some builds I'd like to test from that. Now there were some changes. Tuning, you can guess most of the numbers go down when the tuning phase happens. It's not the end of the world. So we did have some damage reductions and stuff. I don't want to go over all of it. We can just kind of sum it up by saying a lot of it just got numbers go down. A couple more important ones to look at here. Templar Strikes got its cooldown massively increased. This makes sense because it was insanely low before. So it's actually up at 10 seconds now, less your haste, and then you also have a talent that reduces it a little bit. Blade of Justice also got changed. So Blade of Justice damage number is down. However, you can see here on the tooltip, it's no longer physical damage, it's holy damage, so it will benefit from Mastery. However, Mastery scaling has received a nerf, so on live, this amount of Mastery was bringing me in, I think, closer to 36, 37%, somewhere around there. So not a huge nerf, but definitely some damage down. I guess the idea there is now Mastery would affect pretty much every ability you have, so the amount that you get from it had to come down a little bit. So from what I'm seeing on the Sims, actually, my stats are not greatly optimized for what the new Ret might be. It's interesting that, of course, as you sim, your stat priorities will change and change and change over time. But Ret has really favored haste and mastery for quite a while, quite a long time. Things are getting shaken up. So why don't we take a look? Here's some early sims. This is from the Simulation Craft website. So we can take a look at what the potential live build will look like. Now, there are some things that are broken. You can see up top, there's some specs that aren't working properly, so they're way down here. I think it's a safe bet. This is not correct. We can't expect Unholy Death Knights to deal 10,000 DPS. That's probably not right. But if we go ahead and look at the DPS breakouts here, actually, of note, Prot Paladin pumping on the DPS, doing lots of damage. But if we go up for single target damage, this is pretty good for Ret, right? Keeping up with Rogue, Shadow Priest, Arms Warrior, a little bit behind, but kind of the same tier there. And then you get up some of these higher tiers. You have a bit more variance, looks like, with the Shamans, and then the Hunters. Yeah, Survival Hunters are crazy at single target, but they just don't see play because of other reasons, right? So, okay, we don't need to expect Ret Paladin to be the toppiest DPS, but looking good. We can also switch this to the burst and see actually we're quite high on the burst as well. So in a phase where you have increased damage on the encounter or something like that, Ret Paladin's still going to do the Ret Paladin things. Not quite at the level of Arcane Mage, right? But you can see these are the big pump out damage in a short period classes with some cooldown afterwards. And if we scroll down, we can actually see into the breakout. Looks like this one was playing a Dark Iron Dwarf version of the Paladin in the sim. And you can see how kind of the damage ebbs and flows. The peaks are not as high as they used to be, and the valleys are not as low as they used to be. So it makes your DPS, especially in a single target situation, much more consistent. And it does look like the popular build is kind of something like I was playing, focused on the execution sentence and Wake of Ashes popping off 3 times in that 30-second window. Basically a big 30-second, 1-minute burst type damage profile. So one of the things I noticed is the awesome Wowhead guide writer has already updated the things that they're seeing on this PTR build. So versatility being the priority stat for Ret. Now, as always, you can't just follow this. If you only stack versatility, its value goes down. You have to sim. However, chances are this used to be the bottom priority pretty much no matter what you did. So unless you were PvP and you probably don't have a lot of versatility, you may want to check your stats, start looking at what you could do to shift things around. Remember, you can always recraft your crafted gear to change the missive, change the stat profile. Looks like you might want to go versatility haste or versatility crit. It'll be quite the change, and it may change what crafted gear you actually want to wear. If we go back here, I believe This fella, yeah. So in this sim, they ended up wearing the Allied Wrist Guard of Companionship, which is not an item we were currently using. Now, one of the benefits of the Sims is we actually have some early builds here. So we can see for Raid, we actually... Doesn't look like they've quite settled on what's best yet. So there's an example build if you want to do pure single target. There's one that's hybrid single target, so mostly single target with a bit of cleave. Likewise, mostly AoE with some single target focus. And then full AoE. Actually, this one looks like the Ashbringer build we were using, right? Just pure Searing Light AoE. Likewise, if we look at our M+ build, looks like, especially for the upcoming season, recommending having Cleanse and Lay on Hands. Probably running Ret Aura over Devo Aura is what they think. I don't know if I agree with that, but you get to see some of the utility changed around, which is nice. And then in the main talent profile, yeah, it looks pretty hybrid, right? So why don't we check out, see how they do. The first one I want to try out is the single target. This will be the Raid single target, the one with Execution Sentence and the Seething Flames, Wake of Ashes. So you just build around these little 30-second burst windows. What I'll probably end up doing is I'll try doing the single target rotation and the AoE rotation so we can see how each one performs on both. So that'll be a double fast forward. This might take a moment. Why don't we go ahead, open up, see how we do. Alright, we're coming up on 2 minutes here. And yeah, so no buffs at all, right? That's how I run the test with my preserved 412 item level from a month ago. They're coming around 60k, coming down about 57 now. So looks like we've got some big final verdicts about the damage numbers we expect. Execution Sentence about what we saw in the previous weeks. Hammer of Wrath about what we saw in the previous weeks, about the percentage we saw as well. Expurgation much lower than it used to be, kind of sad. Blade of Justice lower than it used to be. So this build seems to very much favor, well, of course, the abilities it converts to Holy Strike. Just Judgment, Hammer of Wrath, and Templar Strikes. Templar Strike and Templar Slash. Doesn't look like we got... Yeah, we missed hitting our Slash a couple times, so maybe that's something we could have done better. So we hit... Actually, no, it's pretty close. We hit 14 Templar Strikes, and we hit 13 Templar Slash, so I missed once. But you can see here, just kind of following the natural flow of things, it ends up being a pretty powerful ability. Alright, well, why don't we try this? So the fun thing is, you just go to Divine Storm as soon as there's more than one target. 2 targets or more, Divine Storm, not much to think about. So why don't we try this single target build on the AoE, just in case we were in that situation, right? And let's see how it does. Alright, coming up on 2 minutes here. So this was how well did the single target build do on AoE. Looked like it was sustaining like, you know, yeah, it's coming down now, but it was like 100, 110k damage breakouts. Not super impressive, right? About what you'd expect to see. Basically the abilities that do some passive cleave, did the passive cleave. Blessed Hammer's coming in a little lower than I expected. Divine Arbiter as well, I kind of expected these to be a little higher. Now with this build, you end up getting Unbound Freedom, Crusader's Reprieve, Lightbound Blessing, you get 2 ranks of your Sanctified Plates. So in addition to being a fairly good single target build, you get a lot of raid healing and self-healing passively. As well, you get your Cheat Death. This build also ends up running Healing Hands, so you end up with that boost on the Cheat Death as well if you do actually have to press Word of Glory. You really don't want to, but if you do, it's fairly powerful. And it reduces the cooldown of your Lay on Hands as well. So now let's switch to the hybrid. So we'll test this out again on the single target. It's a pretty similar build. It's leaning in a little more to the Radiant side of the tree. We've gone ahead and dropped Seething Flames, we've dropped Executioner's Will, and a few other talents on this side to pick up a few talents which aren't going to help us on single target at all, but they'll help us when we switch to the 5-target scenario, so that we'll see how that impacts the play. This one's still not running Blade of Vengeance. We're going to stick with our Empyrean Legacy, in which case it's also going to keep the Tempest of the Lightbringer, so we'll get a little extra damage from that. Interesting to note, this one didn't end up coming recommended to run Divine Wrath. So we're going to have a shorter wings. Don't know how I feel about that, but Let's give it a go. So we'll take this one to the single target first, and then we'll go from there. Here we go. Okay, and we're coming up on 2 minutes here. Just finish our execution sentence. Alright, so that looked about 5k less or so. I was keeping 55k at the point. I was keeping 60 on the previous build. Look at the damage breakout. The final verdict's the same. The execution sentence doesn't hit as hard because we don't have the extended duration, so we're not getting as many hits in. Looks like otherwise the damage numbers fell pretty much the same as the previous single target test. They're just lower. Alright, let's test it out on the cleave target, see how it fares. Okay, and we're coming up on 2 minutes here. I can definitely notice the passive cleave on this talent setup here. Yeah, we came out 130, 120, 130k. So this build gained almost 20k over the previous. So this build gave up about 5,000 single target to gain about 20,000 AoE. I think that might be what you would do in a raid scenario where there were ads, but they weren't very important. Now next up, you can see it's kind of a gradient, right? We shift a few more talents, just a few more. So now we're shifting into Blade of Vengeance. So we're still saying we're still fairly single target oriented, but we've got our Final Reckoning instead of our execution sentence, right? So we're going to really be beating that drum to a 1 minute rhythm now. We've dropped Seething Flames, we've got Blade of Vengeance, so our Blade of Justice is not as good on single target. It does reduce the damage to the primary target as well, so changes Bodge into kind of like an AoE kind of thing. We're still dropping Consecrations with it, we're still running Templar Strikes, another build with Vanguard of Justice. So, this is the slightly more AoE hybrid, another step towards the Radiant side, still focused on trying to single target, but also now hopefully being able to AoE. So our previous two builds on single target did 60k and 55k. Let's see where this one lands. Here we go. Alright, coming up on 2 minutes here. Oh, we still got about 10 seconds, but looking at the DPS, you see it's starting to drop. So this one's coming in maybe like 50 to 53k. This one, Templar Slash, ended up being quite a bit of our damage, actually surpassed the others. So that's something that starts to happen, I think, when you shift these talents around. Plus, remember, our Blade of Justice is nerfed because we're using the AoE version. We've got a bunch of our talents soaked up in the AoE versions of things, so naturally this one just wasn't going to do as good. Alright, let's test it out on AoE. After all, that's what it's for, right? Here we go. Okay, coming up on 2 minutes. It's around 130, 135k, so this one didn't seem to do that much better than the AoE, the single target hybrid over the AoE hybrid. Let's take a look. Yeah, it's about the same number of Divine Storms, Templar Slash with the Cleave doing work, Judgment with the Cleave doing work, Wake of Ashes with the Cleave doing work, Blade of Justice Expurgation hitting lots of targets. So I would say overall, if you're going to be in a hybrid situation, so far it looks like the single target hybrid is just kind of better. It dealt about the same AoE DPS but while dealing more single target as well. Alright, next up we have the full AoE build. This is pretty much what we were running on our Ashbringer Cleave build that we had made up. So going fully into the Searing Light side. We've got Wake of Ashes with the dot, but not the Seething Flames. We've got Final Reckoning with the duration increase. Looks like we're grabbing some of the standard talents again, like Divine Wrath, Art of War. We've got our Empyrean Power and our Tempest, so we'll be shooting out free Divine Storms. Interesting to note, on the left side, we do change things a little bit. So this build finally lets go Vengeful Wrath and one of the Seal of the Crusaders. Keeps most of its raid utility, goes more into Divine Purpose. So this is a big AoE Vanguard of Justice build. Let's try it out on single target first. So the bar it's aiming to hit, the last builds did 50k, 55k, and 60k. So basically, as long as this one does 50k, it might be superior than one build on single target. And then we'll see how it plays on AoE as well. Here we go. Alright, coming up on 2 minutes here. Yeah, and you can see it's another step down, isn't it? Coming in around 45k single target. Now, that's not what this build is meant to do, so no surprise there. Yeah, we're even running regular Templar's Verdict, so we don't even have the improved one. Regular Judgments, Templar Slash coming in a little low. I thought I saw some Searing Lights go off. Yeah, right at the start I had a couple Searing Lights come in with some big crits. But it looks like the damage of Searing Light has been reduced as well. It used to hit for like 90k crits, and now it's down to 60k crits, so pretty substantial nerf there. 3 procs in that 2-minute window, though, is good luck for single target Searing Light, so now that's not what this build's meant to do. This build's meant to clap multiple targets, so why don't we see how it does at that? Here we go. Alrighty, we're coming up on that 2-minute mark. This one was pumping about 150k AoE, so it doesn't seem like it's too much farther, but yeah, 145, 150k. This is definitely the biggest AoE build, but it does feel lower than the previous weeks, I gotta admit. Judgment coming in as one of our biggest AoE abilities with Cleave and the Divine Toll. Pretty nice, pretty nice. Consecration doing work, lots of consecrations going off there. Searing Light, so it does happen more on AoE, and it shouldn't. I guess, because Divine Storm, maybe it would happen a little more. But 6 procs over that 2-minute window, hitting 5 targets each, so that ends up being a pretty substantial chunk of your damage on a big AoE scenario. Yeah, and it goes off sometimes, so okay, so this one comes in around, we're going to put that, it was around 150k AoE. The last one I want to try is the M+ build. So this ends up being pretty similar to some of the single target hybrids. We do shift to the left here on the class tree, and we take a little more utility, a little less personal utility, a little more like AoE stop and dispel. From the damage profile, though, it looks like pretty much the same as one of our hybrid builds. So we'll try it on single target for 2 minutes, see how that goes. It has to beat 45k to be better than the AoE build, the full AoE build. So I think it can do more than 45k single target, but let's see. Here we go. Okay, we're coming up on our 2-minute mark. There we go. So about 51, 52k DPS? Yeah, actually, so that M+ build looks like it came right between the 2 hybrids. So what do you know? On M+ on single target, it'll be alright. It's not the best, it's not the worst. It did look like it was a little bit more AoE focused, so we can give that a shot. Taking a look at the damage breakout, yeah, pretty much as expected here. Actually, so much has gone into our finisher that our trinket damage is coming up on, even on the single target. That's it's a little weird, but alright, let's go ahead. We'll do one more round on AoE. Alright, coming up on 2 minutes here. So 135. Yeah, so again, right between our, within variants probably, but right between our hybrid builds. Looks like this M+ build would be the most hybrid build. I will say, having them all pretty much play Templar Strikes and Vanguard of Justice is a little disappointing. I hoped that there would be options, so that's one strike against the rework. But overall, I'd say Templar Strikes feels pretty good, even with the increased cooldown. It's got a reduced global cooldown, so you actually can do a bit of a combo with it, right? You tap, you do 1 ability, you do 2 abilities, you tap it again, you get your free crit. So it seems like it's fairly worthwhile. And as you can see here, that was just 1 quick use of each ability. Templar Strike, Templar Slash was actually our #1 ability because it automatically crits and the other ones didn't. So that's our review of the 5 builds. Overall, it seems like the engine running them is pretty similar. They all like the Templar Strike, they all like the Consecrated Blade, they all like the Vanguard of Justice. All that's really changing is some of the functional talents, like whether your Blade of Justice is going to hit a single target and do less or do more damage, or if it's going to hit multiple targets and do less on a single target but more on AoE. Still spreading your Expurgation, still spreading your Truth's Wake, doing a lot of these dots on AoE. And on the single target builds, less of that, but still pretty much focused around the same core of either Final Reckoning or Execution Sentence, and then popping your Wake of Ashes. That brings us to Judgment Time. What do I think about this rework now that we're coming to close here? Now, it is safe to say that Ret Paladin won't be the biggest, bestest, toppest, top automatic meta DPS. That's true. However, I think the raid buff, the having basically doubled the amount of defensives, a lot of the passive defense and self-healing, and the extra mobility options are really going to address all the major pain points. The one loss on this, I would say, it does look like you can probably do whatever you're focusing on, you can probably do better than you are on the current patch. So if you spec for single target, you'll get more single target. If you spec for AoE, you'll get more AoE. But it does really feel like the hybrid build is hard to find. It seems like finding a nice place where you can be good at both is a little difficult. I am curious as well. These were all focused on 5-target cleave, but in the event there's like a 2 or 3-target cleave fight out there, you'll be able to free up some of those talents. So I'm wondering what a 2 or 3-target build would look like. If I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But for the things Blizzard wanted to fix, survivability, I would say they fixed it. Maneuverability, mobility is improved. I don't know if they've totally fixed it. I've complained about that before. I don't think we can get by without knockback protection, at least not in the current raid. Maybe in the next raid, though. I think the raid buff situation, look, I don't love this Ret aura, what it became, but it does seem desirable to a lot of players. It may get you some raid invites, so that's fine. And the damage profile, they definitely changed the damage profile. Ret definitely now has a smoother curve, less peaks, less valleys, more reliable damage, while still being able to burst pretty consistently. The losses would be possibly, it might be harder to be good at single target and AoE at the same time. The current retail build using Radiant Decree is kind of just good at everything. And damage really wasn't Ret Paladin's issue, right? Damage is actually fine for the most part. I would say single target needed a little help, and with this build it looks like it got it. Now, I will say I'm not optimized for the new stat breakout. I'm still pretty haste mastery heavy, as we saw. So the numbers you see here, of course, taken for a grain of salt, right? This character's time locked into 412 item level with a certain stat set up so I could compare it to previous weeks. I will say it does feel like lower damage than previous weeks. That's kind of what you expect from the tuning phase. So am I happy with this rework? I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Honestly, I think the talent tree is a lot more interesting. We've got different utilities. We've got different builds. I really appreciate having 5 different builds to show off as opposed to like 2 from all your standard class guides. So I think that's better. But overall, I do wish that there were another AoE finisher. I wish there were some knockback, push-pull type protection built into Ret somewhere. I kind of wish Ret had the option to bring a raid buff that is not unique, so substituting in for a raid buff, maybe like give Battle Shout or whatever you wanted it to be, so that Ret could cover that buff if you were missing something. Those are the kinds of things I would have liked as finishing touches, but it doesn't seem like we had enough time for that. So will I continue to play? Well, obviously, I think I'll continue to play for a little bit at least. I do want to see how the rework actually plays out once it goes live. And then, of course, really I'd like to see it in the next raid, because the next raid just seems like it's more favorable to Ret Paladins in general. There's a lot more bosses with physical damage, and there's just a lot of raid damage, which matches up well with all this passive healing we've picked up. And it doesn't seem like there's as many knockbacks, push and pull mechanics, crazy mobility challenges, although we haven't seen all the bosses tested yet, so we'll see. So hopefully you've enjoyed this PTR coverage. I'll probably be packing up. This is the last one for 10.0.7. I may check it out on 10.1 once they start making some additional changes over there. I'm going to be doing some of the raid testing. I actually missed the first round, so got to be better about hitting those times. But if you're interested and you've been enjoying this coverage so far, remember to hit that like, hit that subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Again, my name is DarkScream. Peace.